India is not only known for its rich culture and heritage, but it's known for its rich wildlife too. When asked about the wealth of Indian wildlife,
India is one of the most rich in biodiversity countries globally. It holds a wealth of wildlife that reflects varied in their landscape, climate and ecosystem. When we are talking about these large mammals, the tiger stands first, and as we all know, 70% of the global tiger population is available in India. And the Project Tiger, a unique success story of our country, and the Bengal tiger stands a very iconic species, and the Project Tiger of Indian government gives a very good protection and the entire ecosystem protection by these iconic species. The second large mammal is our Asian elephants. Asian elephants are the largest living land animal, and the Project Elephant gives them a lot of protection in their natural habitat, and Asian elephants are very close to our culture as well as in the ecosystem. They are also one of the heritage animal of our country. Though they are very good in the natural habitat, they still face a lot of human-animal conflict and corridor issues, and also a lot of habitat fragmentation and destruction. Leopards and snow leopards are also a unique species, and as we all know, leopards are ubiquitous in nature and they are very much coexisting with the human population, whereas the snow leopards are very specific to high altitude, especially in the landscape of Himalayas. And the Indian government has given a very good conservation effort, and the conservation of snow leopard is really of one of our successful story. Finally, the rhinos and other megafaunas. As we all know that Kaziranga is a very good only habitat for Indian one-horned rhinos, and the Assam government in collaboration with the Indian government is taking very good initiative to conserve one-horned rhinos in Kaziranga. And Asiatic lion is also one of the unique species, and it is only available in Gir forest of Gujarat, and the government has taken a lot of initiative, and a good conservation project for Asiatic lion is one of our success story. And these species makes the India's wildlife wealth very unique and rich. With over 1300 bird species in India, India is paradise for a bird watchers. Starting from Himalayan monal, Great Indian bustard, and also the endangered Sarus crane thrive here. Wetlands such as Vedandangal and Bharatpur are very unique ecosystem for the migratory bird. With regard to reptilian and amphibians, India has again a rich biodiversity of a lot of reptilian species, which includes Malabar pit viper in the unique Western Ghat biodiversity, and Indian python, cobras and also king cobras, and many turtles and tortoises in addition to gharial. India's large landscape has got 4 large biodiversity hotspots. The primary one is Himalayas, the second one is Indo-Burma region, and the Western Ghats, the fourth one is Sundaland, which includes Nicobar Islands. And they form a very unique biodiversity hotspots globally. India's long coastline and the islands are rich in marine biodiversity, especially coral reefs in Andaman and Nicobar Island as well as in Lakshadweep forms very unique ecosystem of marine wildlife. And they also habit a lot of green sea turtles and olive ridley turtles along the coastal line, especially in the beach areas, and they form nest and then incubate and they propagate themselves. India's wildlife wealth is a millennium of evolutionary process, and we all have to join together to conserve the wildlife, and it is very important to ensure the ecosystem are protected for the well-being of mankind.
Dr. Arun has incredible knowledge about the Indian wildlife, and he believes that the knowledge has to be transferred to the next generations. This channel does the task of transferring the knowledge.
Through this video, I would like to reach out to veterinarians, wildlife biologists, wildlife veterinarians and conservation educators to take up my 20 years of experience in the field of wildlife rescue and rehabilitation, and they can at least pass on the efforts and then challenges. It would be of good use for the upcoming veterinarians and wildlife veterinarians and biologists to develop their career in this field successfully. The first question coming into your mind would be how to become a wildlife vet. So let me share my thoughts on that. So to get into wildlife veterinary medicine or a wildlife veterinarian, as soon as you complete your Bachelor of Veterinary Science, that's a graduation program of veterinary doctors, thereafter getting into your BVSC, you can take the master's program in any field, but there are universities offering the wildlife veterinary subject as Master of Veterinary Science degree, naming Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Madhya Pradesh and Kerala. So these universities, veterinary universities, are actually offering the master's program in wildlife veterinary sciences or medicine. So whether it is MVSC or MSc program. After hearing the answer of how to become a wildlife vet, the second question would have got in your mind is it difficult to get into wildlife veterinary medicine or a wildlife vet? So my thoughts on this was really it's easy to get into wildlife veterinary practice, because after your master's program or even after your graduation program, you can take up your master's either in the field of wildlife veterinary science. Some veterinary universities are offering the courses in Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Kerala and Madhya Pradesh. Even if you are not taking any of these specialized courses, you can take the master's program in any other discipline like surgery, medicine or even gynecology, and take up your dissertation program on the wildlife species, whether it is captive animal or in the free-ranging animal. Definitely you are getting more exposed to the wildlife, and then chances are more to get into wildlife veterinary practices and develop your career in this field.
This information is something which we do not get from any source easily. As the information was so interesting, a couple of other questions were in the pipeline, and again, Doctor was ready.
Even though I said to get into a successful wildlife veterinary practice, you may have to take up your master's program in specific wildlife medicine courses or even any other master's program involving either captive or wild animals into your dissertation program. I personally feel one should have these qualities to get into a successful wildlife veterinary practitioner,
which is my favorite acronym called TIP. As we know, the interest is the first and foremost quality of any vet in this wildlife field. On top of it, I strongly believe that the acronym TIP is my mantra in this field of wildlife veterinary practice to excel yourself, which expands like this. T stands for tolerance, I stands for ignorance, the 3 P's stands for patience, passion and presence of mind. Kindly consider the same if you agree with me.
According to me, a role of wildlife veterinarian is not only to be a conservationist. He should follow a lot of SOPs and he should know the behavior of the animals, and he should be a good observation specialist. Only then he will be a successful wildlife veterinary practitioner. So when it comes to this wildlife veterinary practice, the roles not only belongs to the veterinary aspect of it, and sometimes he should act as a mechanic, and he should act as a biologist. On top of it, he should know the mechanism of some of these equipments like distance projectiles. Commonly we used to call it as a dot gun, and when it comes to the usage of these guns, and you should know the mechanism of actions and how to maintain the equipments, all those things plays a major role. Only then he should be a multidisciplinary personality and the successful wildlife veterinary practitioner in the field.
This is the major quality they should always possess.
My 20 years of experience in the field, I've never seen any biased, whether it is a gender or senior junior bias. I have seen a lot of women wildlife veterinarians doing wonderful job in different protected areas and sanctuaries, both abroad and in Indian conditions. And when it comes to junior and senior interaction, that is always seen that even though they are juniors in the field, they gain a lot of information through textbooks, also multiple training programs, and those seniors in the field also gather and learn between each other, and it is always a good environment, learning from each other. As long as the intentions are good, there is no such bias arises in the field of wildlife veterinary medicine. I have never seen that in my career, and I have never going to encounter this also in the future for sure. The other important aspect of a successful wildlife veterinary practitioner is working in harmony with the wildlife biologist, because I always feel that these two disciplines are very important, like our eyes in our face. One is going to suffer without the other one, and if we are working in tandem with the wildlife biologist and the veterinarian, then the conservation will be complete. So the important aspect of this is to ensure that the veterinarian will learn from a wildlife biologist, and sometimes the wildlife biologist will also learn something from a wildlife veterinarian. So trust me, every new skill learned is definitely going to improve your confidence, and that is how the conservation should be taken into a next level. The safety is another important aspect of a successful wildlife veterinary practitioner, because whenever he is involved in conflict mitigation or even involving an animal with conflict situation, it is very much important, and he should know about the animal behavior and ensure that the safety precautions are always is his priority. Each and every wildlife veterinarian should know the importance of the Indian Wildlife Protection Act 1972, which is one of the very important piece of legislation everyone should know in this country, because each and every animal are scheduled and protected as per the Indian Wildlife Protection Act 1972. When it comes to the protection of species and schedule, they were consisted in Schedule 1 to Schedule 6. And in Schedule 1 and 2, they are highly protected animals, especially lion, tiger, leopards and bears. And any intervention with these species attracts legal punishment and imprisonment if it was done without the permission of the State Forest Department head. When it comes to Schedule 3 and 4, they are protected, but their attraction towards the punishment and imprisonment will be little lower, and the lower mammals and birds comes under this schedule. When it comes to Schedule 5, the vermins, example rodents, they are allowed to be hunted and removed from the ecosystem as long as the state or the regional government authorities have given permission from the wildlife department. And the last schedule is Schedule 6, and the plants which were protected or endangered, and this prevents the cultivation and the harvesting of these plants, without which the forest department's permission it will not be done. So the plants are also protected in the Wildlife Protection Act under the Schedule 6. Another important aspect of the Indian Wildlife Protection Act is the permission for capturing and treating wild animals. So So any wildlife vet dealing with injured animals or even dealing with conflict mitigation management, they should always take written permission from the Chief Wildlife Warden or the Principal Chief Conservator of Forest Wildlife of the state to intervene with any kind of actions by the wildlife veterinarian towards this wild animal. So even though if it is with good intention, the permission is definitely necessary, and without which it attracts legal consequences. So it is important for any wildlife veterinarian to understand these areas of Wildlife Protection Act. The other important aspect is the prevention for hunting and poaching. Again, the wildlife veterinarian should always be aware of these sections because Section 9 prohibits hunting and illegal poaching of Schedule 1 to 4 animals. So, though it inhibits sometimes a crucially injured animal, or even sometimes if it is really dangerous to human being, the Chief Wildlife Warden can issue a permission to either destroy the animal, or sometimes if it is irreparable damages or even health issues which needs the animal to be euthanized, the Chief Wildlife Warden's permission is definitely necessary before the wildlife veterinarian to deal with these animals' euthanasia. The Wildlife Protection Act 1972 always recognized different protected areas in the landscape of our country, namely national parks, sanctuaries, tiger reserves and community reserves as well. So it is important for the wildlife veterinarians, whenever they are dealing with these protected landscapes, it is mandatory to ensure that no alterations or modifications to be done or carried out within this protected area. Even though if a wildlife vet recognizes a particular injured wild animal really needs some kind of temporary enclosure arrangement within these protected areas, definitely it attracts Chief Wildlife Warden's permission. So without which he can't establish anything, including treating these wild animals within this protected area. So that protected area knowledge is important for each and every wildlife veterinarian dealing with these free-ranging wild animals. Section 50 of Indian Wildlife Protection Act deals with custody and seizure of wildlife and also wildlife products, and this section grants the authorities the permission to confiscate or even to deal with these confiscated animals or even the products. And whenever the wildlife veterinarian was asked to deal with these confiscated animals with respect to either treatment or first aid or even if it is any major surgeries, again he needs to take permission from the Chief Wildlife Warden of the state before he intervenes. The Wildlife Protection Act 1972 lays down penalties against the wildlife crime and offences. The wildlife veterinarian should always be understanding and knowing this knowledge on this particular part, because whenever he is dealing with any kind of animals which attracts Chief Wildlife Warden's permission, is always mandatory for him to take. Otherwise, it ended up in legal penalties. And within this, the Section 51 deals with Schedule 1 and 2 animal, and that attracts 3 to 7 years of imprisonment and penalties. And when it comes to Section 52, it again attracts lower amount of penalties and lower imprisonment, less than 3 years, but still it also attracts imprisonment and fines. So the Chief Wildlife Warden's permission is mandatory. The wildlife veterinarian should always be aware that even if he is dealing with such kind of confiscated animals, before taking the permission of the Chief Wildlife Warden, better not to interact or intervene. Possessing and transporting of wildlife is another important area each wildlife veterinarian should know and have the knowledge about it. Otherwise, again, it leads to legal complications. When it comes to either a live animal or even parts of the animal, it always attracts the same section, and it is mandatory for the veterinarian to understand if it is in a protected areas like sanctuaries or national parks or tiger reserves or community reserves, without the permission of the wildlife authorities, especially the chief wildlife warden of the state, it is not possible for the wildlife veterinarian to intervene. So it is mandatory to understand, even if it is for research or even transportation of samples and for any kind of educational purpose, it is mandatory to take the written permission. Until or unless it is available with the wildlife veterinarian, he will not be able to even send samples to the laboratories for any investigation or even for education or research purposes. So kindly understand the importance of this section 60A with respect to the samples and animal parts. Section 60A of Indian Wildlife Protection Act deals with education, research and awareness of these wild animals in the protected areas or even little outside the protected areas. To sum up the key responsibilities of the wildlife veterinarian with respect to the Indian Wildlife Protection Act 1972, understanding the schedule of the wild animal is primarily important, and taking permission from the appropriate wildlife authorities and documenting the procedure as per the compliances of the habitat which he is dealing with this animal. And the last and final important point is to ensure that he is having adequate knowledge before he deals with the scheduled animal with respect to their Wildlife Protection Act's schedules, their legality, and ensure that these animals were well handled both legally and ethically to attain a proper wildlife veterinary practice. It is essential for a wildlife veterinarian to ensure the legal and ethical conservational oriented practices are completely covered. Hello? Oh, in which location, sir? Alright. So ensure there are no crowd around the animal. I'll be there as early as possible.
As he finished explaining about the legal part of the wildlife, Doctor received an emergency call which he had to take up as a poor soul was in need of doctor. He rushed to the rescue of it, and thus we had to end our questions for the day. We will be back with more information from Doctor. Stay tuned to our channel. Take care. Bye-bye.